Welcome back. It's a hot day, but I went to visit a dear friend in my valley this morning. I love spending time with her, not only because she shares my birthday, but this beautiful woman's 85 years old and she runs circles around me and everybody else that I know. Just amazing person. And I just love visiting with her, and we will spend hours going through her garden and talking, and it's just such a blessing. But she gives so many more blessings than that. Every time I visit, first of all, I have breakfast in the garden, and today it was a cucumber freshly picked and a whole bunch of strawberries, and they were so good. But as we're walking through the garden, she's filling a box with goodies for me, and I love these things. She's just amazing. So not only did I come home with a box full of vegetables, I have a bag of freshly picked carrots. She sent me home with, I think there's 76 quart canning jars and a galvanized chicken brooder. And so I'm all set for when I start hatching more baby chickens, because I've got the brooder and I've got the incubator, so I'm all set. But now I have all these vegetables and we need to use them. And when you have a garden, sometimes it's just like there's so much coming at you. What do you do with it? And so I ask myself as I'm driving home, what am I going to make that will use up some of these beautiful vegetables? Because they are going to be used. So let me kind of show you what I got. These are all from her and they're just gorgeous. Plus, this is baby bok choy, and there's a lot more than this. I love this stuff. Green beans, okra, various kinds of zucchini squash. I think she said this one's Italian, so I'm really anxious to try it. She says it's really good. And some hot peppers. Now, I have a lot of kale and Swiss chard coming out of my garden. So I decided I needed to use some of that too. So we're gonna take not all of these because this is too much for the two of us. So we'll use some of the beans, some of the bok choy, and some of the squash, along with Swiss chard and kale. And I'm gonna cook it with Italian sausage and season it up. I'll probably throw some canned tomatoes in there also. And it's one of those, again, I'm making it up because I have things I need to use. And so come on and let's see what I'm gonna do with all of this beautiful vegetables. Okay, I've rinsed everything off, and she grows organically, so I'm not really worried about it, but you still always want to rinse things off. There's not a whole lot of these little okra, but I love them, so I'm so excited. And I have a ton of okra planted, and I'm just waiting to see how it does, because I love it. And it's something I really can't buy here. If I find it, it's big and woody and tough, and I don't buy it. So I'm just gonna chop this, put that in my colander. Cut these beans into just smaller slices. This is just beautiful squash. And I think I'm only going to use one because two would just be way too many. I'm going to wait on these because I don't want them to get too wilted. And I'll add them with the Swiss chard and the kale. Now I want to see how hot this pepper is. It's got a little bit of heat, but not too bad. Kind of a sweet taste. It doesn't taste really hot. So I'm going to go ahead and use a whole one. Hopefully we don't regret that. All right, I'm going to go get the Italian sausage cooking, and then I'll work on cutting up all of my greens. So I picked some of this beautiful kale. I think it's the Russian red kale out of my garden. And it has some hail damage from last week when the hail just punched holes and stuff, but it's still good. So I've just roughly sliced up the baby bok choy. Nothing real fancy, just smaller pieces. Now, I'm going to just strip this off the stems. And I'm only going to just kind of tear it. It doesn't need to be fancy because when you put it in there, it's going to cook way down. This kale even tastes good raw, and I normally would never eat large kale raw. It's usually too strong tasting. This is not. It's got a really good flavor. All right, this is some of the Swiss chard that I picked today. Some of it is the white and some of it is this beautiful red. And I'm going to do the same thing as far as just pulling it off the stems and ripping it up into smaller pieces. Again, I could cut it, but there's really no reason. When it cooks down, you would never know. And I could probably cook up these stems and they'd probably be fine, but I know my chickens are gonna enjoy them a lot. So it's not going to waste. And I have plenty of vegetables here. So I'm gonna get this sausage cooked and then we'll come back and start cooking this down. And since this is such a fresh dish, here I have some scapes from chives in my garden. And I'm going to tell you, these are so good. I've been picking them and just eating them as I walk around outside. They are so good. They're sweet, crunchy, just beautiful flavor. Not as strong as onions and garlic, so they're just really nice. And I picked some fresh thyme and fresh oregano, because this is a fresh dish, so I'm gonna use a lot of that. Now I'm gonna use garlic seasoning, my own garlic seasoning, which I have a video on that, just because I don't want to have to chop it up right now. So I'm just gonna slice up these scapes, and again, I'll just sit here and eat them. Oh, they're so good. And not tiny, just cut them into pieces. That's good enough for me. I'm just gonna throw the thyme in there like it is, and I'll probably strip just like that, the oregano. And since it's fresh, you usually use more of the fresh herb than you would if it were dried, because dried tends to be more concentrated flavor. So I'm going to use more of it. Now these I'm just going to roughly chop up. But I'm really, again, not too worried with all the greens that are going in there. It's all going to cook down and blend together. All right, I'm going to go check on this meat. All right, my Italian sausage is cooked nicely. It's not really brown, but it is just enough. So now I'm just going to add my okra, squash, beans, peppers, all of that. I'm just going to put it in there. This is great. I have no idea how this is going to come out because I'm just throwing together what's available. It's probably a combination I probably never had before. Now I just want to cook these just a little bit so that they are not raw when I put in the greens. I've let this cook just a bit. The squash is by no means done, or the okra, but it's cooked down just a little bit and softened just a little bit. And before I go any further, this is my homemade garlic seasoning, and I've got the video on that. I'm going to put about a tablespoon. I love garlic. That's why it's garlic. I'm going to add some freshly ground black pepper. And now I'm going to put all these greens in there, and I'm just going to make sure they all fit. And I'll put the lid on for a few minutes so that they can just really cook down. Just like that. So I'm going to let this cook for just a few minutes so that those greens cook down. Then we'll come back and start seasoning this up. Well, my greens are cooking down nicely. And I'm just really trying to stir it all together. Now we're going to add in those herbs. So this is the oregano. These are the chive-scapes and the thyme. And then to spice it up, I had this tiny little red pepper that I picked out of the garden. I'm not even sure what kind it was. And that's going in there, so it's going to give this just a little bit of a kick. Any of this that you don't like, you could leave out. You could add what's in your garden, because that's what this is all about. And it smells really good. I have no idea how it's going to taste, but it smells good. Now I've just got a can of no salt added, petite diced tomatoes. And this is what I think is going to kind of pull all of those flavors together. And there's those that will say, you never cook acidic foods in cast iron. Well, they never told my mama that, or my grandma, and my whole life we have. And you know what? Their cast iron was absolutely beautiful. My mother's still is. So, you do you. I've always put tomatoes and other acidic foods in my cast iron. I've never had a problem. It's colorful. We'll see how it's going to be. I think I'm going to add just a bit of chicken stock to it, not much. I want to give it time for this to all cook together. You might be able to call this a ragu, kind of in the Italian sense, which is R-A-G-U. But you could also say that this is like a ragu in French, which is R-A-G-O-U-T, which the ragu in Italian is usually put over pasta. We're not doing pasta, mostly because we're still doing keto. But the French ragu is a meat-based, generally meat-based stew that you cook down. Now, I'm not going to let it cook a long time because of all these greens, but again, I don't know what I'm calling this because I'm making it up, so we'll figure out a name. I'll put it in the title. We'll see. Now I'm just going to cover this up, put it on fairly low heat, and I'll keep an eye on it and stir it and I want it to cook down some and for all those to get fully cooked and flavorful. We'll come back when it's ready. All right, it's cooked way down. Still has some liquid in it. I did add one Roma tomato that I had that needed to get used, so I added that in there. And just because, I'm going to add just a little bit of red wine. This is a Merlot someone gave me. And I think it's going to go with all these flavors. But you don't have to. Make it up as you go along. I'm going to taste for seasoning. That's good. Needs a little salt, so I'm going to add some pink Himalayan. And just a little bit of black pepper. It does have just a little bit of a kick to it, but that makes it good. So I'm going to let it cook down a little bit more uncovered, and then we're going to come back and have a taste. I think this is going to be really good. All right, here is my garden vegetable and Italian sausage medley. We'll call it that. It looks good. It smells good. Let's see how it tastes. Trying to get a little bit of a lot in there. There's a lot of flavor and just that little bit of heat, and I really think that red wine added something to it. I didn't add a lot, but feel free to leave it out if it's not something you care for. It did add to it. The vegetables are tender, but they're not mush. Y'all know how I feel about mush. But you've got all these greens, and that adds so much to it. Not to mention how much nutrition's in that. Shh, don't tell anybody. It just is really good. It's making something from what you have. And if you have a garden, sometimes it's hard to come up with ideas to put it all together. I just start putting it all together, and it usually comes out pretty good. So I hope this gives you inspiration. I hope you give this a try with whatever you have in your refrigerator or garden. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and be sure and hit the notification bell. But I love hearing from you, so also please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching. God bless, and we'll talk soon.